Then the Lord said to Moses,
"Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt, so that the locusts may come upon it and eat every plant in the land, and all that the hail has left."
So Moses stretched his staff over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. When the morning came, the east wind had brought the locusts. The locusts came upon all the land of Egypt and settled on the whole country of Egypt, such a dense swarm of locusts as had never been seen before, nor ever shall be seen again. They covered the surface of the whole land so that the land was black, and they ate all the plants in the land and all the fruit of the trees that the hail had left. Nothing green was left, no tree, no plants in the field in all the land of Egypt. The Israelites' morning routine, safe in the region of Goshen, was quite predictable. Waking up and starting to think about preparing a simple breakfast meal, they began to get ready to trek towards their daily grind in Lower Egypt, or to begin laboring at jobs that could be carried out there. This particular morning, however, something was very, very wrong. The sky was still dark, and the sun should have been shining. Peering out of their windows and doors almost as one, they looked up into the sky that normally would have been illuminated by the warm rays of the low morning sun. No clouds were visible, but something was shielding the sun. Then, just as they wondered what this rippling, moving darkness in the sky could possibly be, the trailing edge gave way to brightness, sunlight filling the crisp blue sky once again. Looking at each other in shock, they realized that they had just witnessed the tail end of a monumental swarm of locusts. But these locusts were on a singular mission, intent on feeding in all the departments of Egypt except Goshen. Some Israelites were scared as they feared retribution from peevish taskmasters hell-bent on punishing them individually for God's judgment on Pharaoh. Others smiled, looking to the sky, and thanked Yehovah, aware that yet again he is both punishing Egypt whilst sparing Israel. Within less than a day, every plant in the fields, all tree foliage, all fruit, and even every weed growing from crevices was gone, erased from existence. Trying to shut the gate after the horse had bolted, Pharaoh hurriedly summoned Moses and Aaron and said,
"I have sinned against the Lord your God, and against you. Do forgive my sin just this once, and pray to the Lord your God at the least he remove this deadly thing from me."
Although his words sound hopeful, Pharaoh has not put his faith and trust in Yehovah, beginning a process of repentance. In fact, he is groveling, and this is purely out of pragmatism. He is only doing whatever is necessary to get the locusts to go, despite the truly awe-inspiring acts of power that all could see. He has no interest in bowing the knee to the Hebrew God and giving up his own gods. So Moses went out from Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord. The Lord changed the wind into a very strong west wind, which lifted the locusts and drove them into the Red Sea. Not a single locust was left in all the country of Egypt, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go. When many people hear of locusts, we naturally think of those noisy, chirruping insects commonly heard in nighttime scenes on American movies. Whilst these cicadas do indeed eat plants during their short life above ground, they are not the locusts of the ancient Egyptian plague, and they have nowhere near the same appetite. Cicadas are closely related to the leafhopper, whereas locusts are very similar to crickets, as different as cats and dogs. The average locust weighs a mere 2 grams, but astonishingly can eat more than its own body weight in a single day. This doesn't sound too much of a threat until we realize that an average swarm can number 40 billion individuals. A quick calculation gives us at least 80,000 tons consumed per day. A large swarm can eat a staggering 1.8 million tons per day. Based on its modern borders, 4.1% of Egypt's landmass is used for agriculture, which is 41,100 square kilometers. For the plague to cover all of Egypt, it clearly means all the land that contains vegetation. The crop yield of ancient Egypt was about 1.7 tons per hectare, which converts to 170 tons per square kilometer per year, giving us a theoretical maximum yield of around 6.9 million tons from all the agriculture in a year. Going back to the appetite of a modern-day large swarm of 1.8 million tons per day, this means that the biblical swarm, if no bigger than a modern-day large swarm, would only have to stay for 4 days to have literally consumed every living plant in the entire nation. But the Bible makes it clear this was a swarm on the same scale as the plague of hail, the largest ever seen, so big that it would never be repeated in Egypt's history. If the swarm was about 4 times larger than a modern huge swarm, it could eat the entire annual production of Egypt in a single day. For those of you who love statistics, this puts the swarm at a nearly incomprehensible estimate of 3.45 trillion individual locusts. But even this assumes that it was necessary for them to stay all day in order to eat everything. If the swarm was still bigger, they would have needed only a few hours before the entire nation's agricultural produce for a whole year had completely disappeared. The Bible does not do exaggeration. Instead, we have a narrative that is factual and measured. The locusts came upon all the land of Egypt and settled on the whole country of Egypt, such a dense swarm of locusts as had never been seen before, nor ever shall be seen again. They covered the surface of the whole land, so that the land was black, and they ate all the plants in the land and all the fruit of the trees that the hail had left. Nothing green was left, no tree, no plants in the field in all the land of Egypt. White and shaking, as despondent as a defeated boxer, Pharaoh now retreats into his private quarters and, snapping a single word, orders the guards out of the room. Reeling as though punch-drunk and utterly incredulous, he sits down, aghast at the devastation wrought on his country which he personally could have stopped. He feels responsible but defiant nonetheless.
I am Pharaoh,
he yelled, standing back up.
Who does this Jehovah think he is?
Continued Pharaoh defiantly, slumping back down on his couch. Overcome by a flush of fury, Pharaoh stands back up and blurts out,
The slaves are mine, the flocks are mine, the Nile is mine, and I am their God.
Raged Pharaoh whilst pacing the floor. This strange Jehovah now has Pharaoh's head in the jaws of a lion. Slumping back down with head in hands, he moans as the realization hits him of what is to come. Hunger, pain, terrible hardship, and death will stalk his people. As horrifying thoughts assail his mind, he imagines invasion from a hostile people as word gets out of Egypt's devastation. He will now have to strip bare the national reserves and even commandeer personal property to buy food from surrounding nations, but he knows that this will be nowhere near enough. He has very adeptly lined up his people in front of a firing squad. What Pharaoh cannot comprehend is that the Hebrew slaves are not his. They belong to another who only happens to be the creator of the universe. To say that Pharaoh is out of his league is the epitome of understatement. Jehovah, however, has not remotely finished with Pharaoh, who cannot imagine the personal demons he will shortly face. Another undisclosed period of time goes by, anything up to several weeks between the removal of the locusts, the 8th plague, to the 9th plague, the plague of darkness. For the final time in the sets of 3, we are about to see that this 9th plague will be delivered without prior warning. It is a punishment for not heeding plagues 7 and 8. Then the Lord said to Moses,
Stretch out your hand towards heaven, so that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be felt.
So Moses stretched out his hand towards heaven, and there was dense darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. People could not see one another, and for 3 days they could not move from where they were, but all the Israelites had light where they lived. The depth and meaning of this terrifying plague cannot be understated. It is far more of a judgment than a plague, although it is plague 9 out of the 10. It can be seen as a stern forewarning of the 10th plague, which is a judgment. So what could this darkness possibly be? There have been many considerations. We will examine some, but only one fits well. Could it have been a total eclipse of the sun? This occurs when the moon moves precisely in front of the sun, extinguishing sunlight within a large disk on the surface of the Earth. When viewed from space, a clear black shadow can be seen moving steadily across the face of the Earth. Deduced from the speed of the moon's orbit around the Earth, which is fully understood, the maximum theoretical length of a total eclipse of the sun is 7 minutes and 31 seconds. Before and after totality, the sun appears as a crescent. As the moon slowly moves away from the disk of the sun, sunlight returns, weak at first but growing in strength, until over minutes its full intensity is restored. Therefore, it is in no way possible for the plague of darkness to be an eclipse. We have to account for 3 days and 3 nights continuously. So, what about the thickest of storm clouds that lingers for 72 hours? There are several problems with this. Storms at sea can last at least this long, but even amongst the most ferocious, there is always some vague semblance of daytime, and they certainly do not have the ability to absorb light, making visibility essentially zero. We all remember the occasional inky black storm that lasts all day, but something this intense could not occur without incredibly severe rain, thunder, and lightning, which is absent from the description. And anyway, would God perform more or less the same event as the plague of hail, just renamed as a plague of darkness? No, he wouldn't. And anyway, this is obviously not a storm at sea. Also, the description is quite clear that the darkness was so thick that the Egyptians could not see each other. This means incredibly even indoors when torches were lit. So at the very least, we have to explain a darkness that seems to have the ability to be able to absorb light. What can this possibly be in the natural world? Or are we looking at an entirely supernatural event? We will see shortly that there is indeed a spine-tingling supernatural element to this plague. However, God's pattern so far has been to use natural events taken to the extreme, at God's precise timing and containing an aspect of the supernatural that was clear to all, such as the plague of blood, where even pre-filled bowls of water turned red, and the plague of frogs that all died out not naturally, but en masse, and at Moses' precise timing. This plague of darkness will be no exception to the amplified use of the natural. Let's look at a third possibility. Anyone who has lived for a period of time around settlements in hot and arid regions, for example around the Saharan desert, will be aware of a kamsin. It is a hot, southerly wind, whose name originates from the Arabic word for 50, as it occurs on and off over about a 50-day period in the spring. When it blows in, it can often bring a dust storm that looks like a wall many hundreds of feet high and can turn the sun eerily red, or when extreme, can even blot out sunlight altogether, turning day to night. The air becomes suffocatingly hot, impossible to avoid, and many people would choose to breathe through a cloth to filter the air. Now add to the mix electricity. In regions where natural air humidity is extremely low, when these dust storms arrive, the energetic particles of dust generate static electricity, so that everyday tasks, such as taking off clothing or touching anything metal, are met with a flurry of minute sparks. The static helps to actively keep these superfine particles aloft, together with larger particles. These dense dust particles absorb light, in the same way that the thickest of fogs, such as the infamous London pea super from Victorian times, would bring visibility down to just a few feet. Next time on Plagues, Prophets, War and Peace, we see the shocking supernatural element that petrified the Egyptians, and we mark the chilling moment of Pharaoh's personal doom.